Hey, I'm Jesse Itzler. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a dad. I'm an author of the book Living with the Seal and Living with the Monks, and I'm an endurance athlete. And today on the show, we're going to talk about building your life resume. I can't wait. Stay tuned.
Congratulations! You are tuned into Dov Baron's Leadership and Loyalty Show, the #1 podcast for Fortune 500 executives and those who are dedicated to creating a quantum leap in leadership. Your host, Dov Baron, is the founder of FullMontyLeadership.com. He's an executive mentor to leaders like you, a contributing writer for Entrepreneur Magazine, CEO World, and he's been featured on CNN, Fox, CBS, and many other notable sites. Dov Baron is an international business speaker who was named by Inc. magazine as one of the top 100 leadership speakers to hire. Now, over to Dov Baron.
Welcome, dear friends, fans, and fellow aficionados of leadership excellence. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Dov Baron's Leadership and Loyalty Tips for Executives, part of the Full Monty interview series. I'm your host, Dov Baron, founder of Full Monty Leadership, and I'm here to assist you tapping into your deep greatness so you can reach that next level of clarity, focus, purpose, and profit in your business, your life, and your leadership impact. Today, we're going to be taking an insider look at no matter whether you are looking for an entry-level position or to be the CEO, how you may be building an irrelevant resume and what should really go on it. Remember, you can chat about this episode or any past episodes on our Facebook page by going to Dov Baron's Leadership and Loyalty Podcast and joining the group there, chat with everybody else. If you're a new listener, new viewer, thank you for joining us. Strap yourself in. We're about to go full Monty. Remember, you can find us on iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio, or wherever you tune into podcasts. We are always in need of your help in staying relevant, so please get over to iTunes, rate, review, and subscribe to the show. When you do, go back to that Facebook page and let us know you're there so that we can give you a shout out on the live show. You can also catch us on traditional radio stations across the United States every Monday and Thursday, all the way from Georgia, Florida to Philadelphia. We are across the United States. If you're a regular listener, big thank you to you for making us the #1 podcast globally for Fortune 500 listeners. And also, thanks for checking us out on Roku TV, where there's over 100,000 subscribers. And with a potential reach of 2.5 to 4 million listeners for every show, we're honored and grateful to be cited by Inc.com as the #1 podcast to make you a better leader. Remember, you can also find us on Google Home and Alexa by simply saying, play Dov Baron podcast. Again, thank you for sharing the show with everybody you know. All right, let's strip it down, dive right in. As a leader, whether you're a CEO, someone in the C-suite, a sales leader, an entrepreneur, or a leader in any capacity, in a marketplace where everyone from entry level to CEO is changing jobs and careers faster than every other point in history, we better have a great resume. But are you actually focusing on the right things? And what does it take to build a resume that is relevant in order to make the impact that you want to make? Well, stay tuned because you're about to find out. Our guest on this episode is Jesse Itzler. Jesse is one of the most impressive resumes out there. He started the world's first private jet company, Marquis Jets, became the world's largest private jet card company with a $5 billion consummate sales prior to the acquisition by Warren Buffett's company. Him and his partner sold Zyco coconut water to Coca-Cola. He is the #1 best-selling author of Living with a Seal, and his latest book, Living with the Monks. He's run 100 miles nonstop, and his passion for footballers made him one of the owners of the Atlanta Hawks. So and on top of all that, if that's not pressure enough, he's also the dad of 4, and he's married to the Spanx founder, Sarah Blakely. Ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together and welcome Jesse Itzler.
Hey, that's a good intro, man.
Welcome. Good to have you here, mate. It took a while for us to get this to happen, and I'm really happy that you're with us. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for thinking of me, man. I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, it's an absolute pleasure. Now, you are a guy who has lived outside of the box is a gross understatement. Entrepreneur, author, speaker, endurance athlete. You were even a rapper, and most people probably wouldn't even know that because they're probably maybe too young to know that. You've done all that. And at the same time, one of the things, I speak about is being an authentic leader. And one of the things that I've watched as I've watched over your history over all those years is you've changed your haircut, you've changed the way you dress a bit, but Jesse seems to have stayed the same. Talk to us about the pull and the pressure to be something else. I mean, starting Marquis Jets, you probably felt the pull to a suit and tie. Talk to us about staying authentic.
Yeah, I think one of the reasons why we were successful at Marquis Jet and these other ventures is I've been able to fight through that impulse to be something that I'm not. So I've always stayed in my lane. My lane's been a little bit different, a little unconventional, a little unorthodox, but it's my lane, and that's where I'm most comfortable in. And I've always been able to keep my own spirit throughout all my different journeys. I've worn a lot of different hats, but I've never really conformed. And one of the early lessons I learned as an entrepreneur is the importance of differentiation.
Mm-hmm.
And boring doesn't really work. So I've always tried to not just to be myself, and it's worked for me. And I'm always asking myself, Dov, like, how is my product different? How am I different? How is my pitch different? But in an authentic way.
Sure. So going back in time, because I read about you being a couch surfer, and I think we've all done a spot of the couch surfing along the way while really sort of looking for yourself. Is that pre the rap days, or is that after that?
No, I think between the ages of 19 to 22, I slept on, I think, 18 different couches, my friends' couches along the way, trying to figure out exactly what that lane looked like for me, trying to land on my feet. I had a lot of egg on my face early and a lot of egg on my face later on in my life. I've had some big wins, but part of the journey is having losses too. And I was lucky, man, when I started out in the music business, no connections. My father owned the plumbing supply house, and I lived in LA. I got signed to a record label. I got dropped from the label, and I moved back to New York with two things on my resume. I was a kiddie pool attendant, and I was a rapper. That wasn't going to get me a job on Wall Street. So I relied on friends to take me in, and until I kind of found my way. So, and I never forgot that. I've never forgotten the opportunity that was afforded to me by people that believed in me, even when I had nothing. And it was a big part of what ultimately shaped me. A lot of times in my journey, even at Marquis, before the $5 billion in sales that you mentioned, there were a lot of times where I'm like, this isn't going to work. I can't do this. I'm not qualified. I have no aviation experience. We had no airplanes when we started. And, but through those early days of couch surfing, as you like to call it, it built a tremendous amount of grit. And that was probably the number one. They say grit's the number one indicator of future success. But for me, that was a big thing that grittiness, man, even now, I still have that bootstrap mentality that never left me.
So talk to us about it for a minute, because, I mean, first of all, you didn't have any connections in the music business. Did you consider yourself a musical, did you consider yourself to be part of the music world before you entered in as, the white boy rap?
Yeah, I grew up in New York I was a teenager in the 80s when hip hop was emerging. So I was part of the culture just because I was around it. I loved it, but I never
Master Flash.
I never considered myself anything other than this is what I wanted to do. And when all my roommates in college, I went to college, were working on their traditional resumes and writing their resumes, I'm like, why do I need a resume to get a record deal? And I was always, that was it, man. That was my goal. That was my dream. That was every ounce of my fiber was dedicated towards getting a record deal. Didn't work out for me, but I did get the deal. And so no, I wouldn't say that I was ever considered myself anything other than that was my dream. It could have been, I wanted to be an astronaut, but at that point in my life, my dream was get a record deal, be on MTV, and that was it. What happened was I got the dream. I got the record deal, got on MTV, and I didn't reset my goal. As an entrepreneur, it's really important to check the box when you hit the first goal. Find the next box. What's the next thing? What's the next level? I didn't do it. I took my foot off the gas pedal, and I didn't get picked up for a second album, and I had to, start over.
See, that's what I wanted to sort of come in at, because I think one of the great challenges is that we set the goal, we go for the target, we get it, And oftentimes, the band becomes the one-hit wonder, whether that's entrepreneurially or whether it's actually musically, it's still a one-hit wonder. I did this thing, and there's this sense of I can cruise, even if it's not conscious, but unconsciously that I can cruise. Did you hit a wall there? Did you, you said couch surfing also, but I would really like to know what the feeling was. What were you going through when you've gone for your goal, you've got your record deal, you've been on MTV, and now you've got a resume that says rapper, kiddie pool attendant, and you've got some couches to surf on. Are you depressed? What's going on?
I mean, depressed for a little bit, but really
Sure.
just what immediately go to shift to, whether it's failure or success for me, my mind goes to what's next. I don't have a destination mentality, like, let me get here and then I'm done. I'm always what's next. And you talked about it in the beginning of the top of the show, in your very nice show. Like, I don't believe in traditional resumes. I believe in life resumes. And the way you build a life resume, the more you experience, the more you have to offer. And I'm all about experiences. So when that happened to me, it was just the egg on my face, the embarrassment. It was just a moment, but I would immediately shifted to what's next. What's the next stop on this journey? How do I keep hitting, going from one station to the next station to build this just, look, I'm 50, man. The average American, I don't know what it is in Canada, but the average American lives to be 78. So if I'm average, I got 28 years left. I don't want to look back on it and be like, I was the 80% version of me. So it's like, hit it, miss it, whatever it is, what's next? What's next? It's like, let's try to maximize that short amount of time we have on earth. And that's always been my mindset.
Was that, you said it's always, where did you learn that? Where did you get that? Do you know where that came from? Because there's no doubt that there's viewers, listeners who are tuned in right now who are thinking, I just hit the wall with this. I thought I caught the golden goose, like your record deal. And now I'm broke again, and they want to throw in the towel. They feel like throwing in the towel. They know they can't. Where did you get that mindset from?
When I was 15 years old, like I said, I grew up in New York City. I was into breakdancing. I know it doesn't look like it, but I was. I decided that if I went to Washington, D.C., I could probably make more money because there's no way the kids in D.C. were as good as the kids in New York. We invented the shit. So
right.
I convinced my sister to drive my partner and I to Washington, D.C. She just got her driver's license. And the whole way down on the ride, 5-hour ride, I'm 15 years old, I have all this self-doubt. What if the kids are better than us? What if no one shows up? What if we don't make money? What if I stink? All this stuff, just like anyone else, talking myself out. We get there, we set up the boombox in a parking lot in Georgetown. We start doing our thing, and a crowd comes. And now a bigger crowd comes, and my partner's spinning on his head, he's passing it to me, and I take my hat off, I pass my hat around, we collect about $200 at the end of the day. I pay my sister for the car ride, and we we separate some money for gas money, food, and we split $82, $41 each. Can I curse on this show?
Yes. Oh, yeah.
I want to make sure that I give you the authentic version. We talked about authentic.
Yeah. Absolutely.
We split 41. We take $41 each. We split $82. My partner Myron counts the money, and then he recounts the money, and he puts it in his pocket, and his face lights up. 15-year-old kid, and he runs over to me, and he hugs me. He gives me a bear hug, and he goes, "Jess, we're fucking rich."
Fabulous.
And I took the $41. And I realized that experience was a turning point in my life, because I realized at a young age, overcome the fear, overcome the self-doubt, trust yourself, put yourself out there, and get rewarded for something that you love to do. That's addicting. And that was the start of my entrepreneurial journey. Like, let me put myself out there. Let me get over these fears. Because if I stay in the car, nothing happens. But if I get out of the car and put myself out there, then I could be rewarded. And that became a rush for me. And that was the start of it. If I had to pinpoint something, it was like, I liked it. I like being rewarded. I like the capitalism behind it. I like making money, but I like the pressure. My friend Tim Grover always says, pressure's a privilege. As an entrepreneur, entrepreneur and as a leader, man, we play for pressure. We want the pressure. Great stuff happens after the pressure. And it's been true of me all my life. And sometimes that's a lot of weight and it works out. Sometimes it's a lot of weight and it doesn't work out. But either way, check the box. How do we keep going?
Fantastic. I love it. Now, you obviously travel at the speed of frantic in so many things. What made you decide to move to a monastery for a timeout, particularly, in upstate New York? People who think about going to monasteries might go to, I actually lived with monks too many years ago, but mine was in a little different environment. You went to upstate New York to be with Orthodox monks. Tell us a little bit about, why the hell would you do that? Particularly as a guy who runs so frantically and has got so many balls and you're juggling so many, plus being a married man with children and all the other things.
Yeah, well, it's part of building my life resume. I knew it would be an amazing experience I probably would never have a chance to do. But at that time in my life, which was not that long ago, I realized I had invested so much in the physical side of things. I have a trainer. I've run marathons. I ran 100 miles. I've done extreme races and all this stuff. And that part of my life was very fulfilled, is very fulfilled. But I really neglected during that part of my journey, the spiritual side. Mm-hmm. And I realized, like, as a dad of 4, I have 4 kids under 9, as a husband, that spiritual side is so important. And I started thinking to myself, well, okay, who are the masters? If I wanted financial advice, I go to Warren Buffett. If I wanted spiritual advice, I want to go live on a monastery with monks, the spiritual masters, and figure out how I could take some of that 1,500 years of tradition and incorporate it into my, as you say, frantic pace.
Right.
So I went.
So when you got there, that must have been quite a culture shock.
Yeah.
Tell us about that.
Culture shock for them. I came in there at 10,000 miles an hour, man. The culture shock for both of us. I was with 8 monks that had been on this monastery for most of them for 50 years. 50 on 500 isolated acres in the middle of nowhere. No phone reception. There was no TV for me, no radio, I was disconnected from my family. And what happens is when you get out of your routine like that, a couple of things happen. One, time stops. Mm-hmm. When you live in routine, like so many of us, we have our daily routines. Get up, work out, go to work, family time, repeat, and that's cool. But what happens is you get really comfortable. You start going through life like this. Mm-hmm. I want to go through life like this, though, man. I want to go through life like this, experiencing, learning, and I want to slow the clock down and maximize my life. When you get out of your routine, and as an adult, it's very hard to find newness. Mm-hmm. How do you even get newness? We live in routine. Newness is like in the form of a vacation. You have to work hard at bringing newness into your life. When I got there, everything slowed down. And it was dog years. One day was 4 days. And that was very powerful. And I started to reestablish my relationship with time. And I started to recognize things around, and I can give a lot of examples of this if you want to talk about it, but how, we think of relationships in terms of people. How is my relationship with my children or my parents? But we very rarely think of relationships in terms of money and time. I'm very clear on my relationship with money, and I'm very clear around how important time is. And that once I really reestablished my relationship with time, there was a fundamental shift around how I wanted to live my life, with urgency, doing more of the things I love to do with the people I love to do them with. And that became my mantra going forward, man. I want to put as much on my plate of the things I love to do with the people I love to do them with, period.
Yeah, you've talked about your 4 buckets. Is that in direct relation to this, in what you're saying around the time and the moving things forward? Very
much so. So I have my family, I have my wellness, I have my business, and then I have like a miscellaneous box, like, the causes that are important to me, friends, etc. And if something doesn't fit, usually, of course there's exceptions, but if something doesn't fit into my family, my wellness, my business, or something that's important to me, I'm not doing it, man. It's a waste of time. I don't have that luxury of time. I'm 50. I just don't have it, I like to do a lot of adventure stuff. I like to be outdoors. I just climbed Mount Washington, which is one of the most dangerous mountains in the state to climb in the winter. There were no 70-year-olds at the summit. So that window to do the things that I love to do as a percentage of my life, my remaining life, shrinks dramatically year over year. So those are my buckets, and I try to stay in my lane. I try to stay in those 4 buckets, because otherwise someone else controls my time. This has nothing to do with money. This has nothing to do with like, oh, well, you're in a position. No, it has to do with how I want to live my life.
So, yeah, because that's the easy argument, right? The easy argument is, well, you got a ton of money and so you can do what you want. But, for the person who's living on whatever their income might be, they might feel like they have less choices. But it's actually about the choice of where the commitment is to put your time and to put your energy.
100%. I remember when I lived in New York City. I lived in New York City for 26 years. And I used to run up to the Bronx along the water every day. And I remember going up one day and seeing a man that had a little radio with an antenna, like a hanger that was used as an antenna to get the reception. Dirty clothes with his son or his grandson fishing off the pier every Sunday when I would run up. And it was clear that this guy was not incredibly well off just by the radio and the whole.
Sure.
But clearly one of the happiest guys every Sunday. He had his son, man, or his grandson, and he was fishing and doing what he loved to do. And it just really struck me as a reminder every Sunday that it doesn't have to be, I'm going to go on a yacht in Italy to be fulfilling. It just has to be what you love to do with the people you love to do them with. That could be movie night at your house on Netflix.
Absolutely.
So, there's all these reminders, and I'm not here to preach about how to live your life or anything like that. But for me, that's what's become important to me. And the sooner you recognize what's important to you and how you want to live, I think the more important it is.
Yeah, I fully agree. And, that's why we're so focused on purpose stuff. But how would you guide somebody watching, listening, because, oftentimes I'll say to somebody, we help you find your purpose. They go, well, I know my purpose. And I go, well, what is it? And they tell me, that's not your actual purpose. That's a bunch of obligations, or that's what you think you should be doing. How do you guide somebody, Jesse? Because, you've been doing this a long time and you've been holding true to yourself and you've gotten down to your 4 buckets. How would you guide somebody to recognize what's truly important to them? Because they may, as you know, people are striving towards the yacht in Italy, and then they get on that yacht and they stand there and go, really, this is it? What the fuck? Where's my life?
Yeah.
There's got to be more than this.
So I don't think there's one easy answer to this. I think,
No.
I think you can have multiple purposes.
Yes.
I don't think there's one grand purpose necessarily, right? So you have different, I might have a dozen purposes, but I think if you wanted to dummy it down, I think the first thing is what is it that you enjoy doing? I think that's one of the most important criteria. Do you enjoy doing it? What are you good at? And what's positive for the world? You can really figure out, man, what it is you love to do. You're providing a service that you love to do that has a benefit to the world. That's as close as I think you can get to your purpose as possible. I think that's one definition. And I think it starts by asking yourself, like, what am I good at? What do I like to do? What makes me feel? You dummy it all down to one thing. There's 7 billion humans in the world. There's 7 billion humans. We all have one thing in common. And that one thing is we want to feel good.
Absolutely.
It's all about how you feel. You could have $1.5 billion. It doesn't matter if you don't feel fulfilled and feel good and feel like you're doing something that makes you feel good. It all comes down to how you feel.
Yep.
So figure out what it is that makes you feel good. A lot of times it's dictated by how you think. But think about in your heart of hearts, in your heart, in your DNA, what makes you feel good, and do more of it.
But again, isn't that a easy thing to say when, because, in the hierarchy of needs, that's easy to say because I don't have to worry about the mortgage or the rent or whatever it might be. For the person who's looking at it, because you and I both know that even though people are maybe in an executive role, very often people are a couple of paychecks away from disaster financially, even though they might have, most people have what I call leased wealth. In that, they've leased the car, they've leased the house. It all looks good, but it's really a paper. It's built on paper. So when this idea of do what you love and the money will follow is kind of empty for those people. Is there something that you found within yourself that got you to connect to that deeper part of yourself that said, even if I can't pay the rent, I have to do this?
Here's a very simple test. If you look at the way we live our lives, there's ways to measure everything. There's an IQ test for intelligence. There's bank and financial and taxes for finances. There's a scale to weigh yourself. Like, there's a way to measure everything except happiness. So let's do a very simple test. You and I will do a very simple test. Or anyone listening, take all the buckets in your life, your weight, your finances, like you just mentioned, your employer, your relationships, where you live, put everything going on in your life, your kids, and put them in a big blender. Blend them up. On a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being the Dalai Lama of happiness, and a 1 being someone that's rock bottom, rate yourself, okay? Mm-hmm. You don't have to tell me your number, unless you want to. But usually, most people listening, I would bet, 6, 7, right in the mid-sweet zone, something like that. No one's a 10. No one's got it all figured out. There's always an issue. I wish my relationship with my wife was better, or my kids were better. There's something going on. Everybody.
Sure. Everybody.
Let's say you're a 7. Now, for most people, I'm a 7. I'm good. Well, a 7. If my son comes home with a 70 on a test, that's a C minus.
Mm-hmm.
In the most important bucket of your life, happiness, the most important bucket of your life, that's a C minus. The way the test works, everybody listening, if you actually did that, your brain immediately goes to a 10. And then the 1 or 2 biggest issues in your life pop up, and it subtracts from a 10 to whatever number you said you were. So if you're an 8, you're like, oh, easy. My weight and my finances, or whatever it was. Whatever the 2 things that popped right into your head are, those are the 2 things to work on. It has nothing to do with money. It has nothing to do with anything. If you fix, instead of focusing on the other thing, which I just said, the things that make you happy, if you fix the 2 things that are broken, you're going to live a much fuller and better and happier life. So a lot of us, what we like to do is we like to focus on the things that make us happy. Man, I love watching football. Let me sit here and watch the football games. But that's not going to fix the fact that I'm check to check, right? Or it's not going to fix the fact that I'm living over my head, or my relationship is broken because whatever the reason is. Let's invest a little time to put the hard work in and fix the things that are broken. And then let's see if we find our purpose and our true calling.
See, I think that's great advice, and I really want people to get that, because you've heard me talk about this so many times on the show, is I recognize that we're all doing whatever we're doing because we want to feel better. Everybody, as you said, Jesse, everybody wants to feel happy, and we want to feel happier. And the problem with that is that we decide happiness by comparison. We look over there at Johnny and we go, well, I'm happier than Johnny, so I guess I'm all right. Well, what about dealing with your shit? What about actually dealing with your stuff? Because the quality of your life, the quality of how you live and the impact you can have can go up vastly, but you'd actually have to look at your shit and deal with your shit in order for that to happen. And so often we don't want to do that. And we justify not doing it by looking at those comparisons. And then we look at the people like Jesse Itzler and we go, yeah, but he got lucky, which of course we both know is bullshit. He got lucky, or it's all right for him. As opposed to saying, what? I mean, because you may not want to be Jesse. You may not want to get to that. That may not be your goal. You may not want to be Dov Baron. You may not want to be Jesse Itzler. You may want to be something else. But I think one of the great challenges is that we make comparisons with everybody else, and there's only one person to compare to, and that's what you just said, which is the person you're comparing to is, what do I look like living at a 10? What does my life look like living at a 10? And not to put yourself in competition with others, but what actually brings you joy. I've said for years that the ultimate measure of success is joy. That's what, you know this with the guy who was fishing on the river there. I know this because of traveling in part of my life, my early part of my life, traveling and studying with all different spiritual teachers that I studied with and the psychology I studied with, meeting people who were bone poor and deliciously happy. And that's the same thing, right? It's this dig into yourself and find out what it is for you. Because that seems to be what you've done.
Yeah. And I think, part of that for me is just operating in a life system and a philosophy and my daily way of living, or trying to. I don't get it right all the time for sure.
No.
But in a way that makes me proud, right? Yes. So like at the end of the day, I want to be proud of myself, proud of how, like I always like to tell people, would you ask yourself this question? Would you recommend yourself as fill in the blank? As a parent, as a spouse, as an employee, as a boss? Would you recommend yourself as blank? And then look at the answer. I've had arguments in my past with partners. Partnerships are hard, and they make a really strong point that something was my fault. Maybe I make a really strong point if something was their fault, but it's not. At the end of the day, I ask myself, looking back on it all, would I recommend myself as a good partner for this person? If the answer is no, I got to fix what I did wrong. But if the answer is yes, I'm good. Mm-hmm. That's a really powerful question.
That's a great question.
And it's a really powerful question. Like, would I recommend, if I was a kid, would I recommend myself as a dad? Am I doing the most that I could do as a parent? And if not, why wouldn't I recommend myself? What are my weaknesses? And I'm constantly asking myself in different scenarios that question.
I love that question because, as you said, there are so many facets of our life where you can ask that question. Would I recommend me as a dad? Would I recommend me as a husband? Would I recommend me as a friend? Would I recommend me as a business partner? It can go on forever, right? And it constantly tells you, here's where I need to lift my game, which I love. That's a very, very powerful question. Jesse, if it's okay, I'd like to go a little bit deeper and ask you, tell us, if you can, tell us a little bit about your childhood, because, my background is in psychology and as well as metaphysical and quantum physical studies. But I know that our childhood, there's no doubt our childhood impacts us. Can you tell us a little bit about how you grew up and what the impact of that was on you?
Strong family unit. Parents were together, still married, 65 plus years. Youngest of four. So I was raised differently than probably my brother and my sisters.
Sure.
Strong sense of community, very loyal community, smallish kind of town, which I think played a big role in my life. And my parents encouraged me to try a lot of different things. They gave me a long leash. They never said that's a bad idea, good idea. You want to be a breakdancer? You want to be a rapper? I mean, from where I grew up, what? That's not the normal path.
No, I mean, you just said you're a small town, tight community. Yeah. It sounds like, you're listening to Grandmaster Flash and you're like, right. You're going to go and do what? I don't think so.
Well, my parents encouraged that. And they were like, even as I got older, They allowed me to do what I loved. They never took away my dreams. And my dreams were never my parents' dreams. They were my dreams. You know, you can't do it for somebody else. You got to do it for you. But here's what's really interesting about where I grew up. If you looked at my town, and it wasn't a small town in the middle. I grew up in Long Island, in Roslyn, Long Island, right? New York City. But if you looked at my town and you took the 4 years when I was a freshman, like a senior in high school, and you went 4 years out, so kids 4 years older than me and kids 4 years younger, in that 8-year span,
right?
We have had some kids went to jail, some kids became billionaires, some kids own professional sports teams. I think we have 3 sport owners. Bernie Madoff was from my town. We had the biggest Ponzi scheme.
Don't brag about that, makes it my back.
No. But here's my point.
Right.
We had it all, but everybody came through the same system. Same movie theater, same doctor, same deli, same teachers. Some ended up in white-collar crime. Some ended up in violent crime. Some waxed rich. Some became the biggest thieves of all time. All in my town. I don't know what the fuck they put in the water in my town. But something happened in that town, man. And I don't know if it was the competitiveness. I don't know if it was the swings. But the one thing that my town had, it had an air of diversity. Black, white, Jewish, Spanish, Chinese, this, immigrants, this, that, all in the same high school. And man, I'm so lucky to have grown up with that, to be exposed to so many walks of life and so many interesting people, and to have friends of different backgrounds, to have that kind of exposure, and to have parents that allowed me to do it was a great gift.
Yeah, I mean, it's, you know, when you talk about your family and the way it would be very normal for them to be kind of more restrictive, you know, would be, you know, to shorten the leash, particularly for some kid who wants to do stuff that is almost anti-culture for you know, being a white middle or upper working class, lower middle class, whatever it was, you know.
I wouldn't say anti-culture. I would say pro-love, and I would say that
right. Beautiful.
We are taught. You hear this all the time, as leaders, as people. You speak all over the world, and what do you hear at the conference? You'll be surrounded by like-minded individuals and like-minded people, and that's great. Except you learn the most when you're with people that aren't like you. I learned the most living with a Navy SEAL and living with the monks and having a childhood where I could go into the Italian area, and the Black area, the Jewish area, and this area. And that's where I learned. And it's not the like-minded. I know what like-minded is going to get me. Like-minded. Yes. And there's a place for that. There's a place for that. But you really grow and learn the most when you step into the unknown. And you explore against people that are nothing like you. And that, going back to my childhood, my parents gave me that gift. They encouraged that. And usually you stay within your own little tribe. But my parents didn't do that. And they were one of the few parents in my town that didn't do it. And, you know, I got to see my parents eating dinner with all different kinds of people. And that was the gift, man. That was the gift they gave me. I didn't even know at the time.
Yeah, it's amazing. I grew up in a ghetto, and we were surrounded by people of all different colors and races and cultural backgrounds. And I feel like it was such an immense gift to have that the idea of being racist was like ridiculous, right? It just didn't make any sense, right? I mean, and we used racist terms. Let me not pretend we didn't. We used racist terms, but they were not racist terms because they were used on all of us, and it was a way to recognize each other. And we were like, yeah, okay, you know, hey, Jew boy, that was me. Okay, yeah, you know, it wasn't an insult. It was like, okay, you know, it's like, all right, that's what I am, you know. And I had black friends and brown friends, and, you know, nobody bothered. It was all playful and respectful and honoring. And I think that it taught us so much. I mean, when I went out and traveled, and again, I was the oddball doing things we didn't do in my town. I went off and did things and traveled the world and studied. I never felt like I was out of place. And it's that same thing. It's because you and I have a similar philosophy around get comfortable being uncomfortable. And that is where the real growth is. It's not in the like-minded. I think you need that for your support, but but support and growth are different. And the growth comes, as you said, from getting out there and doing something different. What made you decide to live with Goggins and with the Navy SEALs, with David Goggins, and go to that extreme? Because that's very different than living with the monks in some ways.
Yeah. I'm drawn to interesting people. I met Goggins when, there was no internet, Instagram. He was just, neither of us were where we are today.
No.
So I was drawn to him for that reason, that he was just I saw him in a race. He weighed a lot. He was a big guy. I saw like a drive that I'd never really seen, and I was drawn to it. I was like, what makes a guy like this tick? And I went out, I Googled him. I saw he was a Navy SEAL. I asked him if I could come have a meeting with him to kind of get into his head and see how do I get some of that drive? I want more drive,
Right.
And I realized I was never going to get that over lunch, and ultimately asked if he would come with myself and my family, and he did. And, there was no thought around a book at the time. The book didn't happen until 6 years after he lived with us.
Wow.
And he lived on and off with us for a period of time, not just 30 days. He was in our life for a really long time, part of our family for a really long time. And that's what happened. Like most things in my life, it wasn't planned. It just let me follow my gut. And, I didn't do any background checks. It was like nothing. Just like, come on, man.
Well, it's fortunate that you're married with somebody who didn't say, listen, dude, out you go. Because we all have to consider our partners, It's like, okay, you want to bring home who and do what? I don't think so.
I made a good decision, and Sarah and David ended up getting along really well. But it was a good decision.
Well, there's an old saying, and that is, find the right partner. I too am very blessed, and I've been a pretty unusual fella and do weird and wonderful things in my life. So I was like, it's a bit strange, but okay. So clearly you've got that too. That's one of the ways we're both mutually blessed.
Yes.
Tell us about your Japanese 1 day a year ritual.
Yeah. So I'm part of the Atlanta Hawks ownership group. It's a basketball team, by the way, not a football team.
Oh, it's basketball. Yeah. I'm sorry. I apologize.
That's okay. And one of our past players, Kyle Korver, taught me this or introduced me to this ritual. He was doing it, and he kind of told me about it, and I started doing it. And the notion around this ritual is, it's called a misogi. And the notion around a misogi is you do something one day so hard every year that the benefits of that 1 day event, because it's so out of character and so challenging, last the entire other 364 days of the year. So every year I try to put something on my calendar that's just, shocking to the system. And the discipline behind it, the fear behind it, the impact from doing something so uncommon or so challenging. It doesn't have to be physical, whatever it is.
Right.
And for me, it's lasted a lifetime, not just 364 days. And I do that. I do something every year. It's actually this is kind of interesting. I just turned 50, as I mentioned. So for my 50th birthday, as a gift to myself, I made a list of 50 things that I always wanted to learn how to do, but never did. I don't know how to drive stick shift. So I hired a chess instructor, a free diving coach, a wakeboard instructor, a ping pong coach, a square dancing and ballroom dancing instructor. And I have given myself these lessons, 50 things that I am now learning over the course of this year that I always wanted to learn. And it's been amazing. It's like, you forget as you grow up, you go into business and you perfect whatever it is, right? Here are the stages.
Mm-hmm.
You figure out what it is you want to do, maybe in your 20s. In your 30s, you perfect it. In your 40s and 50s, you cash in. The trajectory might change a little bit now with the internet and stuff like this, and maybe it can speed up. But you got to perfect what you're doing before you cash in.
Right.
And you spend so much time becoming an expert speaker, podcast host, whatever it is you're doing, that it bottlenecks you. And you can't learn other stuff because who else is in this space? How do I become the best in my competition? So I've enjoyed giving myself the freedom to learn these things that I otherwise would have never have known how to do.
That's very cool. You have an event. I mean, you're talking about putting together, doing one thing, one day a year that really pushes you, but you actually have an event that is actually a sleepover at your place. And that makes it sound like, oh, nice, we'll go over to Jesse's and hang out and sip cocoa and hang out on the pillows in the basement. It's not quite that. So tell us a little bit about your event.
Well, I have one in my house, two. One's called Hell on the Hill, and one's called Hell Freezes Over. But it sells out in 1 minute. It's actually for charity. But because it's been so popular in demand, I have opened up an event called 29029. And what it is I rent a mountain, the entire mountain. I bring in tents that everybody sleeps in, and bands and food trucks and speakers. And we go there for 3 days at the mountain that I rent. But the event and challenge is you hike up the mountain, you take the gondola down, and you repeat until you climb the equivalent of Mount Everest, 29,029 feet. It's called 29029. And we have hundreds of people. It's the last 3 events have all sold out. And we do one in August and one in October here in the States, one in Utah and one in Vermont. And for a lot of people, that is that event. That is that.
Oh, I'm sure.
Get to know yourself, life-changing. What I love about it is it's a hike. So it's totally doable. It's all this. Am I willing to put the time in, stay in it? Because it takes a long time to climb the equivalent of Everest. But it's an amazing event. So you got an open invite, man.
Thank you, my friend. I sincerely appreciate that. So how long did they get to do it? The 29 times? How long does it take?
Yeah. So it's 29,000 feet. It's in Utah, it's 13 summits. The distance is different. And in Vermont, it's 17 summits. You have 36 hours to do it. So you can sleep, you can eat, but you can't really dilly-dally beyond that.
That is fabulous. Fucking crazy, but fabulous. I love it. Jesse, you've been very successful. You've done all kinds of great things. You've talked about the ups and downs. You've talked about, it's not just one way. What was one thing that you did, you likely thought was really good, that you did for a long time, that actually blocked you from success?
I stayed in partnerships that I probably should have gotten out of, because
why would you do that? That's interesting, because I think that's one of the things that I see people do all the time, not just in business, but in life.
My reason is probably different than others. First of all, I don't like confrontation. So I have a knack. I've always avoided confrontation by ignoring it. So that's one of the reasons. And the second reason is we were rocking and rolling. We were making a lot of money. We had a successful business, but I wanted to do other stuff. And I was prevented from doing it because I stayed in that entity for too long, and ultimately I did go and do my own thing. But that's one thing I think, I don't regret it at all. I loved it. But looking back on it now, you don't get your 30s and 40s back.
No.
You don't get them back. So if you can identify something now that's not working and you continue to think it's just going to change he's going to change, she's going to change, I'm going to change, the circumstance is going to change. Yeah. Then 10 years later, it hasn't changed and you're 10 years old. So, when you can identify something like that, even things that are mega successful, you have a company, it's doing great, everything's great, and you're making a lot of money, you're a leader, all the things you talk about, that's great, except there's a whole nother world out there. So I'm not saying, everyone's like, scale it, we got to scale it, we got to grow it. Maybe, but at what expense? You're rocking and rolling, and that's great. But all of a sudden, now you're rocking and rolling, and you're 70 or 80. You can't do what you want to do when you're 40 and 50. So you got to weigh this thing we talked about in the beginning, life resume. You got to weigh what it is that's important to you, and what do you want? What are you going to regret when you're sitting there at 80? What didn't you do that you wished you did? And it's not going to be like, man, I wish I made more money. It's just not. It's going to be, and we hear it, we know it, but we don't live it. We all hear the same thing. When you're on your deathbed, you're never going to regret not working, that you work too hard. Yeah, but everybody does. Now, of course, you got to make a living. Of course, you have to feed feed little kids, and you want to do stuff and take vacations, and I get all of that. But there's still time to carve out that little fishing trip on the Hudson River, that you won't regret you took instead of watching the Georgia football game.
That's very good insight. What is the best piece of counterintuitive advice you ever got? Something that everybody else would say, oh, you should never do that, or, it would seem like it's the wrong thing to do, but it was absolutely right for you.
Well, I know this is a business show and you have business leaders, so it's not going to be, but it's not business advice.
Great.
By the way,
we're human beings before we're business people.
So this will open up another 5-hour conversation, so we don't have to go all the way down this path. But I was taught from an early age that breakfast is the most important meal. Have a big breakfast. But everybody around me was having 5-hour energy and coffee, and we're exhausted and like had to take, and I have only eaten fruit until noon for 27 years, unwavering. I got that advice from one of my mentors, Harvey Diamond, who wrote a book called Fit for Life. It was against what everybody said, but it was by far the best thing that ever happened to me. I have boundless energy, knock on wood, very rarely get sick, knock on double wood. And a lot of it has to do around my diet. And my diet is against what everybody would say. Well, no, not now. Now people are fruits and vegetables and plant-based. But then, meats and where do you get your protein and all the things that the expert say. But everybody's sick and everybody's tired and everybody's overweight, listening to the experts. So the best advice I ever got was from a guy that people thought were nuts. But for me, changed my life.
Yeah, and I think that one of the great things about that is that you found something that worked for you, and I think that that's where the challenge is that people go, oh, well, Jesse's doing that, so I'll do that. And I would encourage you to do that, but find out if it works for you, and if it doesn't, find something else. And somebody says, well, keto, everybody should be keto. Yeah, try it. But if it doesn't work for you, try something else. Paleo, vegan, whatever it is, try, but don't be afraid to find out what works for you. And it's so much, particularly in the world of health and fitness, which I've been obsessed with for 40 years, is we're looking for the magic bullet, and there isn't one. You got to pay attention to your own body, and you find that you've got boundless energy. That is great for you. And I think it's so important for us to recognize that.
But I'll tell you what won't work. And you're 100% right. I agree. What works for me might not work for others. I'm a vegetarian. That might not work for others. I don't even talk about, it doesn't matter to me. Whatever works, I wholeheartedly agree with what you say. You try things, you keep what works, and you throw out what doesn't until you ultimately build a system that works for you. And everybody has their own system. But let me just say two things. As you evolve, your system changes. So if I have 4 kids, I can't operate under the same system that I had when I was single Jesse.
Absolutely.
It doesn't work. I don't have the time for that. I have to, more time is to be allocated over here than when I had 100% of my time. Your system changes. So you figure out the system that works for you, but that system always evolves as you evolve. Number 2, as it relates to food, and you were just talking about, keto, paleo, this and that. You're right, you try everything. But one thing that doesn't work are big marketing machines telling you what's nutritious and what's not to sell their products. There's a fine line between companies that have $1 million advertising campaigns that target you and trick you into thinking what's good for you to sell their product. And there's a lot of fake news around that's out there. And that's a hot button for me. And that's a no-no. All these major companies trying to drive their stock price up, selling you chemicals. That doesn't work.
Yeah, I fully agree. So that kind of takes me into the next question, and you may have already touched in on it, because my question is this: in a world where we are so, particularly today, we're so terrified of offending people because everything we say could be not correct. What's your bravest opinion, Jesse?
Well, I'm making a documentary right now against all the major cereal companies called Serial Killers. And
Oh, I love it.
yeah, and it's about the deception in marketing. So I appreciate you segueing into that. And that's a big fight and a big battle. I don't remember your exact question. What was your question?
Your bravest opinion.
Yeah, so I mean that's going against companies that are multi-billion-dollar companies. You know, it's me versus breakfast, and I don't know if it's the bravest opinion, but I know it's almost an impossible fight. But when you have somebody that their job is dependent on driving a stock price up, and whether the stock goes up, if the stock goes up, they benefit and they get rewarded. If it goes down, they don't get rewarded as much. They might even get fired. But that stock price isn't based on whether or not your kids or family are well nourished and healthy. It's just whether they buy the product. When you have that guy versus a guy that goes back to your beginning thing, purpose, who's driven because it's in his DNA to expose that, who are you going to bet on?
Yeah, I agree with you.
Who are you going to bet on? So that, I don't know if that's my loudest voice, but that's the voice. I want my kids to see that fight.
Yeah, because one of the things, for me that about leadership is, I've said, I believe that leadership is by example. I want to live as a leader. I don't give a flying hoop what the title is, but as a leader, it's the impact that I have by virtue of how I lead, meaning the influence and the impact. And so can I live with that? And if I sold $1 billion worth of overproduced cereals that are based on a false economy that is pumped up and is supported by governments to keep corn and wheat and all these things, when I look at what kids eat for breakfast, I want to scream. So I totally understand it. This over-processed wheat with a pile of sugar on top of it and mass-produced milk, it's terrifying to me. It's absolutely terrifying. So I actually want to know more about this. And maybe when the doco comes out, you and I will do another show on that entirely, because you and I can go a long way down that road. And I think it's a very important subject, because leadership is impact and influence. And this is an example of impact and influence beyond profit, which is powerful. Thank you.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it.
That would be awesome. So Jesse, tell us what brings you joy, mate? What brings you joy? Simple joy.
This is going to sound like a package or canned answer, but I feel really grateful. So I find joy in the smallest things and the biggest things. I mean that honestly. I love spending time with my kids, my family, my friends, people. I would say people. I built my career on definitely not being the smartest guy in the room, but so you have to rely on relationships. And that's always been my thing. I love people. I like being around people. I like treating people. So yeah, that probably is number one for me.
I love that. As a leader, particularly as a conscious leader, I find that in my experience of 30 odd years of doing what I do, I find that the great leaders are always about growth. They're always committed to their growth. As successful as you are, what's the one thing that you're still working on within yourself? What's something that you have to, you go, okay, I need to get better at, get stronger at in my life?
I'm pretty good at blocking out the outside noise, but something that I always work on, not really caring what other people feel. It's easy to say that you have thick skin like that, but it's hard if you have a book and there are reviews, or you do a podcast and people are like, this guy's a goofball. It's hard to, so that's something that's always a work in progress. Being a better husband, always a work in progress. Marriage is tough. Anybody who says it's not, then I need the secret. I mean, I love being married, but it's always work. Always want to get better. Taking criticism is something I'm not great at. So I'm always trying to get better at that. I've become better. I have a laundry list of stuff I need to improve and work on.
Right, and I think that that's really important for our viewers and our listeners to get. I mean, I say this all the time, that it's easy to look at Jesse or somebody else and go, oh yeah, but they've got all their shit together. And you know what? Nobody's got their poo in a pile totally.
Listen, I feel as overwhelmed as everybody. I feel pulled in a lot of directions, spread too thin, frustrated. I wake up with the same responsibilities and stresses. My kids have issues just like everybody else. It's all the same stuff. Try to simplify things and do what I like to do.
As we finish up, I would like for you to deliver something that would, as a practical guidance, that you would have our viewers, our listeners go do so that they can really get what it is you're saying, that you would have them take an action. What would the action be that you'd like them to take as quick as possible?
Well, I think putting something big on your calendar is a really good thing. But I think it really comes down to the small things. There's an old saying, how you do anything is how you do everything. I think it's really about the little things. People always talk about what's the one big thing. And I appreciate the question, but the real thing is it's the little things. It's how you do anything. It's how you do everything. And, creating that environment in your head that, man, this is my system. This is how I operate, is the most important, I think, advice I would give if I was giving it to my kids. It's like, don't put cleaning up your room off until tomorrow, because that's an indication of being lazy. Someone else will do it. It's okay to not finish what I started. Go do it now, and create that tone and set that environment that you're a finisher and that's who you are.
Yeah, I think that's particularly important information, particularly to entrepreneurs, because as entrepreneurs, we're all great starters and often not very good finishers.
Yeah.
Jesse, it's been fabulous having you on the show. Thank you so much for your time. Please tell our viewers, our listeners, where they can find out more about you and all the wonderful resources you have, about your books and your courses and you've got so many great things going on.
Yeah, so you can find me. Instagram's the best, at my name, at Jesse, Jesse Itzler, Itzler. My website is jesseitzler.com. I appreciate it. And my books, Living with the Seal, Living with the Monks, Amazon, anywhere books are sold. And if anyone wants to come climb a mountain with me, Dub, you got a free invite.
Thank you, sir.
Climb a mountain with me, 29029. It's check it out. The website. You can get it on my website, jesseitzler.com.
So jesseitzler.com. We'll make sure, of course, that is in the show notes. It's been great having you on the show, man. Thank you so much. Thank you for your time and your commitment, and thank you for your growth as a human being and being an example to that for all of us to just step up the game a little bit, which is great. Hope you'll stay with us to the end. I want to thank you for being part of the show, and I want to remind you, dear listener, that all this is worth nothing. If you're just listening and watching, who gives a crap? You know what? It's with the hole in the donut. Transformation comes from application. Take what you've listened to, take what you've learned, take some notes on it, listen back, and then take action. Remember, you can chat about this show or any of the past episodes of the show. Go to our Facebook page, inside Facebook. Just look for Dov Baron's Leadership and Loyalty Podcast. Remember, the research consistently shows that one of the biggest challenges facing even the most successful companies can be counterintuitive. In that these fast-growing companies often hit a point where they realize they're spending a fortune attracting, training, and developing their talent, only to have them leave at an alarming rate. If you're sick of training and investing in the training and development of your talent, only to have them leave before you get your ROI, then come talk to us at fullmontyleadership.com, where we provide you with the essential leadership skills to rekindle and amplify the hidden loyalty assets inside of your organization by tapping into purpose. fullmontyleadership.com, providing you with the concrete soft skills to get you and your organization to the top and keep you there. Why? Because you can't outsource authenticity. Also, remember to stop by the Matrix, matrix.fullmontyleadership.com. You don't need a triple W, just Matrix like the movie, fullmontyleadership.com to get your authentic leadership Matrix self-assessment tool valued at $197, absolutely free to our viewers and listeners. And remember, you can catch us on Alexa and on Google Home by just simply saying Play Dov Baron podcast. Thank you for sharing the show with everybody you know. Till next time, stay curious, my friend. Stay curious about building your life resume. That your life is not going to get better by simply surrounding yourself with like-minded people, but by surrounding yourself with people who think very different than you. I'm Dov Baron, and I'm here to assist you tapping into your deep greatness to reach the next level of clarity, focus, purpose, and profit in your business, your life, and your leadership impact. And I am out.